Prince Charles' views on architecture are likely to provoke fresh debate tomorrow when the latest plans are unveiled for a new town to the west of Dorchester. The Poundbury development is to be built on land owned by the Duchy of Cornwall, and the £25 million project is being seen as a vehicle for the Prince's views on classical design and community consultation. But it's aroused mixed feelings in the area and among architects. Eventually, the Duchy hopes the development, which is centred on Poundbury Farm, will be grouped into 4 self-contained villages. They'll provide several thousand homes, public buildings and workshops. So far, only the first phase has been planned in detail, and that covers just 25 acres. Newsnight has talked to Prince Charles' master planner, Leon Creer, about his ambitious model, its aspirations and origins. Sarah Spiller now reports from the heart of Thomas Hardy's Wessex.
It stood, with regard to the wide, fertile land adjoining, clean-cut and distinct, like a chessboard on a green tablecloth. It was compact as a box of dominoes.
When the author Thomas Hardy wrote of 19th century Dorchester, he talked of a town untouched by the faintest sprinkle of modernism. And it's a description that finds favour with some of those today who share Prince Charles's vision of how this town should develop.
It seems to me the important thing is to be able to have houses that are at affordable rents.
Yeah.
On a recent trip to Dorchester, he outlined the hallmarks of that vision, his enthusiasm for traditional design and his belief in letting the community have a say.
We've got so used over the last 40 or 50 years to looking at planning and building and design, local and urban design, in one particular way. Like you only build housing estates, which always have cul-de-sacs. The point I feel we ought to re-examine again is how to design on a traditional basis again. I mean, what I wanted to try and see was a development, if it had to be, along more civilized lines, to show that it's possible to have a development on different principles to what we've been brought up to believe in the last 40 years.
It's on this rich farmland to the west of the town that the Prince hopes to realise his dream. If the whole development takes place, it could cover 400 acres and take around 20 years to complete. An architect's impression gives some idea of the ambitious nature of the scheme. 4 different quarters comprising a mixture of offices, workshops, public buildings and homes. A mixture which some claim turns modern planning theory on its head. Gone are the zones for different activities, the suburbs and industrial estates. But the whole development is a long way from becoming bricks and mortar. The first phase has already been scaled down, and the latest model shows an initial development covering just 25 acres to provide 250 homes, workshops and public buildings. Doubts are already being aired on how the whole plan will unfold.
If this development were to go ahead, it would be a momentous event in the history of 20th century planning, and I wish it well. I mean, I think it would be marvellous if it succeeded, but I think we have to be realistic and we have to recognise the limitations that possibly the Prince and his architect don't recognise.
But in Italy, in an ancient walled town, the Prince's architect, his master planner, sees a model of how his ideas may work. Leon Creer has been accused of being a dreamer in an ivory tower, but though he's built little, his views on design have been highly influential. And as he looks out over the densely packed town of Lucca, he sees a vision of an urban environment where people can live and work in the same street, where everything is within easy reach.
Lucca is one of the rare models which still survives, and it's not just in its outline, but also in its use. Most buildings don't exceed 2 or 3 stories. And that is, I think, the most agreeable way of organizing towns. When you take this building, you put it out on a car park, out in the periphery, it seems just like a normal shed. But it's the contrast of small and big which makes it so remarkable. And we're going to try to organize Dorchester in such a way that the public uses are really concentrated on squares in larger buildings with these larger features, which will recreate the quality of a place which you used to have in old towns.
For Leon Creer, this 2,000-year-old Italian town, is much more than just an inspiration for his ambitious scheme. The design of this place, its tree-lined boundary, its narrow streets leading to squares and imposing monuments, form the basis of his plan for a new Dorchester. But can this classical European model meet the needs of people in late 20th century Britain? In London, at the august headquarters of the Royal Institute of British Architects, President Max Hutchinson remains sceptical that this model will take account of a modern lifestyle.
Buildings are created not just from the outside in. And I have a dreadful feeling when I see this finely wrought model of Poundbury Farm that it's as much about model making as it is about home making. And after all, the people that live and work in these buildings, they're going to have satellite television. They're going to have Sony Walkmans. They're going to have contemporary kitchens. They're going to have home computers. And I think the building should say something about that lifestyle.
This new development at Abbotsbury near Dorchester shows how such ideas can be put into practice. It's this combination of vernacular Dorsetshire style and traditional building materials Creer insists must be used in his new town. And there'll be a design code to keep architects and developers in check. But how practical is it to insist on traditional materials and techniques? Will developers be prepared to take on the costs of the Prince's new plan? The local council are confident the new project is viable, whilst others insist it's only possible because of the royal involvement.
It is a much less profitable way of developing than, shall we say, building an out-of-town hypermarket or whatever. This sort of development needs to be subsidised to some extent, and I can't see developers who do not have the benefit of the aura of royalty, I can't see them accepting smaller profits in order to carry out this sort of development.
We already have evidence here in West Dorset that developers are taking that cost on board, not just in Abbotsbury, but in the whole of our villages and in our towns to a degree, where high-quality environmental design is already taking place without and before Leon Creer and the Prince came to do this scheme here in Dorchester.
But economic demands have already meant substantial changes. As part of his plan, Creer wanted to relocate this rugby club and redesign a leisure centre. Not only did this prove too costly, when local people were consulted, they told the Duchy they wanted a smaller initial development. But while plans for the first phase have been scaled down, both the Duchy and the architect insist the basic philosophy remains the same.
The community consultation exercise that we undertook was showing people the ideas that Leon Creer wanted people to comment on. What we've actually come up with now we're perfectly happy with.
Over the last 9 months, this scheme has changed a lot. Has grown, has shrunk, has changed in nature. Yet the basic fundamental principles have not been compromised. And I don't agree that through compromise you always get something better. The new bypass and
Creer's refusal to compromise on his basic ideas would appear to sit uneasily with the Prince's views on letting the community have a say. But Creer believes that consultation is only necessary to stop architects creating carbuncles, and that when you give the people what they like, there's little need to ask them what they think.
I don't believe at all that you should sit down with people and design a town. I find that absolutely absurd and demagogic. I don't think that's the way it works. And architects are only useful if they can offer something which people like. And then you don't have to consult day and night.
So is the building site making more or less noise than you thought when you...
But for John Thompson, a community architect working in London, consultation is an important part of the process. He helped the Duchy organise a planning weekend to sound out people's initial views on the development.
The people of Dorchester overwhelmingly support the general intentions, but they are naturally and correctly cautious. They wish the project to start fairly soon, to start in a relatively small way, to go cautiously. They want local people to stay involved, and they want everyone to learn as we go. That is what we discovered at the planning weekend.
The opening of the Duchy of Cornwall's shop tomorrow heralds another important consultation phase. At stake not just the classical design, but the principles behind it. And the Duchy will no doubt be anxious to hear people's views on the central idea of mixed uses, a live-where-you-work town.
If I find work here, next corner, if I find within 2 minutes walk a house for my family, and I can afford it, I bet you 95% of people will choose that.
For Kriya, Lucca is special because the mixed uses theory works on a large scale. In the centre of the town, there are dozens of workshops scattered amongst shops and homes. And Kriya believes this is not only environmentally sound, but improves people's quality of life. In his plans for Dorchester, he's made room for small workplaces like this one. And it's in Lucca's ancient amphitheatre that he sees an example of how the arrangement might work.
Well, I have always talked about there should be nothing further away than 5 minutes. So in a real good urban fabric, you have virtually all the uses. As you come down from your staircase, you have them down right next to your entrance door. And that is the dynamite, the sort of magic of town, that you have everything very close. So it is, this proximity creates lots of jobs which today don't exist. And it creates small jobs which are so missing today, which can be easily integrated.
But even in Lucca, there have been problems in maintaining a town that tries to be self-sufficient in jobs while keeping traffic to a minimum. And when Kriya met the town's architect and mayor, they outlined the difficulties they've faced in striking a balance.
Sì, bisogna trovare un giusto equilibrio. Noi comunque crediamo che questa città...
One has to find a balance. This town has adapted itself to a less hectic life, and we believe all cars must make way for a more relaxed way of life.
Subito al di fuori delle mura, della cerchia murata. È molto difficile perché bisogna trovare l'esatta misura degli interventi.
It is difficult to strike the right balance between the activities going on in the town and people's lifestyles, but this is what we strive to do.
How all this might work out in Dorchester's development depends to a large extent on the kind of industry the new town might attract. The council believes this kind of high-tech electronics factory is a sort of light industry that might fit into Kriya's scheme. But down in Dorchester's Trumpet Major pub, opinion is mixed as to how it might work.
Caveat vernoveria, we say. Beware, Dorchester. It's a very dangerous project.
I think, quite frankly, Mr. Kriya's ideas simply don't match into modern living.
I think a lot of people want to live where they're close to where they work. It depends on the kind of industry which is provided.
We also think that the fact that there is some interest in providing something that's exciting and new, rather than just what I tend to say rather nastily, the old Castle Park syndrome of just houses and houses and houses round roads. This at least is worth looking at.
I think we're going back to the old days now where you had a pit and you built houses round it.
Whatever the feeling about mixed uses, for many in this town, the real success of the project will depend on how it meets local need. And if the development goes ahead at all, it must provide homes people here can afford. It must not turn into some kind of yuppie ghetto. The mayor believes that could mean the duchy making concessions on the price of land. But he says that with Prince Charles involved, the project might stand more chance of success.
If we can do it, and with Prince Charles, he is the one person we can do it with, it would give hope to other towns that they do not have to go down the traditional path of building a massive housing estate without anything there that appeals to the people.
When visitors troop around Dorchester in the future, on their itinerary may not just be the hardy sights, but a new town a few miles away, a town that will stand as a monument to a royal vision. Whether visitors view it as an archaic princely foible or a blueprint for the future now depends on how those involved in this project tackle important social and economic questions. The questions of whether a classical ancient model like this can be adapted to meet modern needs. How we can learn from the past when we build for the future.
Sarah Spiller reporting. And now a quick look at tomorrow's papers. And the Times has trade deficit setback deals blow to city, and also Archbishop Tutu there escaping from the tear gas attack. Another picture of Archbishop Tutu, trade gap The Independent, Solidarity veteran aims for gradual reform on the Financial Times, Daily Telegraph, trade gap and the human chain in the Baltics there. And the Daily Star, we have the great G-Reg disaster, all these foreign cars that we're buying. And the Daily Express, Queen's $2 billion bonanza, that refers to the increase in the Queen's personal wealth. Now look at tomorrow's weather. Much of the country will be cloudy with showers, although in the far north there will be some sunny intervals. In the south it'll be dry and sunny. And that's all from Newsnight tonight. We'll be back tomorrow at 10:30, but for the moment, from me and from all of us on the programme, very good night.